Thank you so much, Regina, for that bulletin. And now we get straight into the viewpoint. And today our conversation is on the heavy rains that the weatherman has actually predicted, or actually told us that it should be ongoing up till January. So we want to look at the heavy rains and our food security as a country. The heavy rains are here. What are we doing with all this excess water? Now, I am joined by our biotechnologist, that is Professor Richard Oduor, who is the chairman, Kenya University Biotechnology Consortium, and he is here to just let us in on this particular discussion. Professor Oduor, welcome to Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you, Vivian.
If we might just get straight into probably just defining what food security is before we get into the conversation.
Well, there are several definitions for food security, but simply put, it is when a country is able loosely to feed its people for a given period of time. Meaning the moment a country is able to withstand calamities, for instance, that one single calamity does not take us off, the balance, then at that particular point you say that that country is food secure.
Okay.
But before then, we will be continuously food insecure. And there are countries that have actually protected and reached that level of food security that can withstand a period of time. And it speaks to strategies, it speaks to planning, it speaks to preparedness.
Yeah, you said that there are countries that have actually reached that point. Where exactly are we as Kenya when it comes to our food security?
We are not in a very good place and stage because we have just come from very crazy episodes of drought, several cycles, and now we are here with the rains. But incessant, processes of drought will certainly lead to what we call, poor crop losses, and of course as a result you will notice that as a country we will start having hunger all over, famine and different livestock dying. And in this country we have diversity of sources of food. There are other communities that feed a lot more on or depend on livestock, others on particular crops. For instance, maize, if it's not in this country, we actually claim that we don't have enough food, which is another discussion because it's not right what is happening. And of course there are areas that when you don't see a lot of say Irish potato, waru, so different parts of this country have unique sort of desire for certain foods. And as a country, we, because of those several things, climate change, we are talking about pests, diseases that are affecting crop yields or crop production, you will realize that we get to a point where the country is unable to meet its annual demand or basket for food. And that then means that as a country we are really at a bad place. We are talking about unga for instance is skyrocketing, the prices of food stuff, and other things that are contributing to food production. The prices are high, and if that happens, then as a country we start now veering off very actively. And this time round, look at the fuel costing, for instance, and that is part of the factors that really contribute to food production. So it's a very compounded situation, and as a country I think we need to discuss a little bit more than what we are currently doing as a country. Yeah,
you've spoken about hunger, which we actually have experienced this year. We're not talking about something that happened 2, 3 years, 5 years ago. This year we experienced some parts of the country experiencing a hunger strike, and the Constitution clearly stipulates that every person has the right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food and acceptable quality. What is it that we are not doing right as a country that we are not able to meet this?
Well, many things. Some can be solved, others are catastrophes, like when we talk about El Nino, for instance. We have no control over that, apart from just blaming the climate change. Probably from our end, we only needed to look into strategies for preparedness when the water hits the ground. What do we do as a country? But others are a lot more about what we we plan our strategies as a country. What we are not doing correctly starts from the whole value chain of food production, right from soil preparation to post-harvest. You know, Vivian, when before you plant, there is data that is available in this country. For instance, from meteorological, they have a fair, way of focusing, and therefore you're likely to get to know whether we are going to get enough rains or we are going to have a bit of drought, and this actually happens a bit early. So what do we do with that data when we get it from meteorological? If they say, for instance, that we will have a bit of, a lot of rain, for instance, now, what have we done early enough to prepare ourselves? And when they say we won't have enough rain, what does that mean for a good country to plan? What it means, therefore, if they project that we'll have X milliliters of water this time round, then we need as a country to start looking at, within that amount of water that we've been, informed about, what kind of crops will survive that, so that you start even thinking in terms of profiling what kind of seeds you want to have, what are early maturing. Do we go for beans instead of cassava that takes a year? Do we go for maize, or we go for smaller, early maturing crops? And that is acceptable. So it's about strategy. Then once you've prepared your ground ahead of planting, then when it gets to time for planting, you must also decide which seed are you planting. Are you planting one that is insect protected through biotechnology? Are you planting one that is probably disease protected? Then once you've planted, are you weeding agronomic processes in time? Because you must also weed on time. The crops that require pruning, say tomatoes and others, must be pruned at the right time. Are we very alert in that sequence? Because as we are talking now, we don't even have enough, if any, extension officers even to let us know at what point do you apply even the fertilizers, at what point. We don't have enough. It is a dying sector. Extension officers are critical. When we were growing up, there used to be people from Ministry of Agriculture who would actually come on bikes or motorbikes to the villages looking at, the kind of diseases that are popping up, telling you how to even plant, what kind of seeds, weeding time, this disease is coming. Those guys are no longer here. I don't know whether you still see them. They are not there. I know there are efforts to try and revive that, but it needs to be faster. Because now we are having fertilizers, for instance. How does a farmer who has never actually even seen these fertilizers in the village, and remember this country is largely small-scale farmer, will know when to put what kind of fertilizers? And have we done, and this is a very unfortunate state, that as a country, we don't have a very good platform in terms of even getting to know, to test the soil. Do you know different sections of this country have different soil types? Others have higher pH, others are lower acidic, others have different nutrients. So it's not the same. So when you do that, then you even get to know what kind of, fertilizers and farm inputs. It's not a one-shoe. But even after harvesting, because you have harvested, for instance, you've harvested cassava, you've harvested your maize, how do you handle the product? Because many a times we get sufficient harvest, for example, for maize, but over time you realize we did not store it very well, so we get aflatoxin. Again, maize, we have struggled with it all through up to harvesting. Then we lose it at the point of storage because we didn't store well, we did not handle it at the right place. For instance, cassava. When you harvest cassava, within 2-3 days, it's already getting, bad because of, the bioactives that get oxidated, and therefore it enhances the product, the process of degeneration of cassava. That again affects cassava. So what are the planned post-harvest losses? How do we control this? Do we therefore convert cassava quickly into other forms, crisps, probably dry it, make it into flour, other mechanism? And there are a lot of strategies that we can use after that. So it is a combination of the entire value chain. Even when we are transporting, does the person who is transporting actually say tomatoes from where, aware of the perishability of tomatoes, so that he doesn't waste time even in terms of distributing it? If he gets a puncture along the way traveling to Nairobi, for instance, does he need to, is he aware that we need to figure out how to transfer this to another probably vehicle so that it gets to Nairobi on time, rather than waiting to fix your tire that will take a day or two and they are getting perishable? To what extent have we really trained this, the people within the stakeholders within the entire value chain? That is a very, very important discussion, and we need to start that discussion very actively.
Yeah, and why does it seem that we always seem to be caught unawares? Because we knew that El Nino was going to be here, then it was like, we were not sure. It was wishy-washy. Was it going to come? Was it not going to come? But the weatherman had already told us that El Nino will be here in October. It didn't really get here in October, but November, we are experiencing it at the moment. Why do we always seem to be caught off guard? Is it that we just do not prepare, or is it sheer negligence?
Vivian, you're asking a very technical question, because it is true that the weatherman told us way early that there will be El Nino. Yeah. But, well, the precision of it, if it was in October, then it moved to November. But also they indicated that the peak will be November. That was actually discussed. But as Kenyans, you know us, we are the same people. When we didn't see it in October, we were just like, you know, these guys are, you know, liars. They are not.
But I'm thinking our leaders, not us as the common people. We can say whatever we want, but our leaders. Yes. I mean, didn't they prepare? Money was set aside for El Nino.
You're right, and probably my rejoinder to that would be that yes, it is a combination of both unpreparedness and also sheer negligence, like you're saying. From where I sit, I think that a well-planned country benefits from the data, so that the decisions are science-based and data-based. That way, you make a very precise plan and strategy that can withstand whatever, you know, unexpected or unintended occurrences. As a country, we needed to have, first of all, prepared a bit early in terms of, first of all, warning. It is really saddening that we are seeing our brothers and sisters being washed away and their properties in the, you know, coastal region, and this will spread out, you know, to many parts of this country if these rains continue the way we are currently seeing them. If this continues, really, we first of all expected, because the government has all the systems, including Nyumba Kumi, which is the smallest unit really currently, we needed to have activated those kind of channels so that our brothers and sisters are not caught unawares like we are currently seeing. So yes, we were not prepared, but more importantly, what were we supposed to have done a bit early? Right now it's a bit late. We can't say that we are going to collect that water and do anything useful with it now if we didn't do the dams ahead of time. So sometimes as a county, as a country, both, you know, county governments and national government, they need to really synchronize on certain things. Well, I'm aware that, and we are aware that agriculture is a devolved function, but certain things really need to be spoken, you know, there needs to be harmony between the two, you know, governments, so that there is concerted efforts towards solving certain problems. Now, we needed to have thought about dams. We needed to have thought about what are the crops that would be early maturing. What are the crops that will withstand the floods, because they are there. We don't need to, do we need to start thinking about improving certain seeds so that the crops have stronger stems or stalk, so that when the floods come, they don't need lodging a lot more. What is the thinking? Is it, shouldn't we have thought about figuring out when this water is happening, what are the areas that, even within those flooding environments, you'll notice the neighboring areas are not overly flooding. Have we mapped those so that even with this flood, there are areas that are still doing a bit of agriculture to sustain us? Because as it is, we are focused on the floods and probably not discussing around that area. Where are the areas that are left or projected to be a little off the ground, that we can still ensure that we are still doing a bit of agriculture? Because once we are done with making sure that they are safe, taking them to higher grounds, then the next thing is hunger. The next thing is a disease. So we are talking about hunger immediately, but the disease will be here shortly. You know, waterborne diseases, the cholera will be here shortly. All these other crazy diseases will be here with this. And once it goes through that, then it spreads out in the entire country. Then the pressure starts on the government and even the systems that we have. So we were not prepared, and that is very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. We were not prepared. And our leaders, we knew, but we never took the data seriously. We actually, I think we've been treated to a lot of disappointments, that we even think that certain national calamities will not happen and it's just sheer threat. But it's not the truth. The truth is that these things do happen, and this is not the end of it. We should start again planning for the next, going forward.
So this means there's nothing we can do right now. As you've said, there's really nothing we can do with the excess water that is here, because it's plenty of water. We see places, you know, are looking flooded, that are flooded and all. So there's absolutely nothing we can do to conserve this water. What are we doing with all this excess water?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. One, we need to stay away from it because it's dangerous. It will flood away our. Actually, the best strategy is to try and keep and handle or collect the little that we have, the little food that we have, the animals that probably we have now, move them to safer grounds first of all. But quickly, if we had dams that were already about to be done, we can channel this water that direction. But it might be a bit, you know, foolhardy to think that we can start digging dams now and complete them on time and then guide the water. So for now, we are only hoping that there are a few dams that were, you know, developed earlier on, that we can divert a bit of this water. But it is not new. We will continue singing about it. But I think, if I'm asked, my opinion would be to advise the government quickly to start thinking very actively, because this area is known. It's the Kano area, it is the coastal area, it is the Budalange areas. You can actually just name them very quickly, that it will happen, even with just normal rains. So my thinking is that we need a long-lasting solution to this, even diverting the water so that when it comes, the route moves to probably a nearby river, so that it gets to the course of the river and it moves to the final destination, would still help. Just guarding them with the gabions quickly, but that is now trying to solve the problem, not using the water. Now we are more reactive than being proactive with calamities. And that is an area that really we need to start thinking about very actively as a country.
Do we really as a country do risk assessment? Do we do that?
Well, you would, you know, as a government, there are different bodies and organizations that really are involved in surveys and even getting the data. And I am privileged to serve in one, which is Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, KNBS, which is the custodian of the official statistics for this country. And what that would mean that over time, and depending on the need, KNBS would go out there to collect data that is very critical for the government to make decisions. So yes, the data is there. And there are different things. There are economic surveys that are done. There is, even if you talk about risk assessment, you can even look at the census that we do, household and census that we do after 10 years. That's also a very interesting area that can help the government to project many things. But every year, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics gives economic survey data for this country, and every month there is that update of the monthly publications that come out, the quarterly publication, the half-yearly, and of course the annual publication. This information is available. By the way, I'll tell you without fear of contradiction, Vivian, that the government doesn't lack information. It's well serviced. It has the best of the departments. State departments are many, and the people who are, you will be surprised that the civil servants are overly trained. Very, very good brains are in there. What I feel from where I sit is probably we need to coordinate and empower them a little bit more so that they are not overly cautious like always they are. Civil servants are very cautious people. They don't want to be seen, because in civil service there are ranks. You cannot just pop up with something that should be done by a PS and you, a senior officer, think that you can make that decision. And those ranks are there for a reason, but sometimes I feel the bureaucracy sometimes stifles some people with very, very good brains. So from where I sit, I feel the government has enough information. We cannot even talk about risk assessment. They know that when meteorological department says that, hey, there will be, heavy rains, that's already an assessment there, therein, that, hey, plan very well. And these things can be seen ahead of time. And over time, the strategic department really needs State Department of Planning and Development and Economic Development is there, and it does all this kind of planning. So, and even development partners have a very fair understanding of what happens in this country, because they also initiate their own risk assessment and projections for the countries. And Kenya is not just a single country; it sits within East Africa and the global economy. So it's not very probably strategic to claim that we don't have enough data in terms of risk assessment, and that's the reason. The thing is that we just need to man up as a country, figure it out very quickly and stop this, circular or more or less incessant cycles of calamities one after another. If it is not floods, it will be rains. If it's not rains, it will be diseases, or if it's not that, it will be livestock dying. So, and that's okay. There is no country that lacks these kind of things hitting them. The drought is not unique to Kenya. Yeah. Diseases are not unique to Kenya. Even El Nino is not unique to Kenya. But how prepared are we as a country? So that is a deeper discussion, and it's an area of concern, and it's important that even now the county governments, the governors themselves, and those in areas that are really affected should really think actively, because we know them. We know this area, so we can never, we can't come back every year, saying anytime we have calamities that we are shocked. We are not. So on this one, I think the leadership needs to figure it a little bit more than what is currently happening.
All right, Prof. On that note, we take a short break, but we'll be back to continue with this conversation. At exactly 37 minutes past 7, we get to continue with the conversation that we had already started right here on The Viewpoint, where we were talking about heavy rains and food security, and we were just looking at how prepared we were as a nation for these rains, that is the El Nino rains. And unfortunately, according to Professor Richard Odwor, we were not really well prepared, because all this excess water seems to be going to waste. We're not conserving them anywhere. But Prof, if I may just get into, I want us to look into agriculture, and you tell us what are some of the trends that are emerging in agriculture that may help our country when it comes to food security.
Thank you, Vivian. I think very largely that as a government, there are new trends that we can pick up very quickly. We have digitalization of agriculture. There are things in biotechnology, and that's an area I'm very comfortable with, in the crop improvements against constraints, and probably I'll talk about that. There is a lot of desire to do precision agriculture, and of course remote sensing. There is now emerging trends around the machine learning and, AI, artificial intelligence. How do we then modernize our agriculture? And all those areas are very interesting. We need to start benefiting from the data that is coming all through the system. But more importantly, we need to appreciate that the climate is changing. The El Ninos will be here, the drought will be here, pests will be here, and diseases will be here. That is when now scientists, like many of us who are in biotechnology and in crop development and improvement, need to come in and help aggressively. And we have been doing. That is when we need to look at what are the seeds that we have that are tolerant, for instance, to drought. And we can make seeds that are tolerant to pests. And this is a discussion of modern crop improvement. And in this country, every time you talk about the biotech, people really, trivialize the discussion, and they zoom into, genetically modified foods, which I have done that from 2005 to now in this country, and therefore there are a lot of misgivings around it, and that is the reason why I'm here, because at Kenyatta University, where I serve as the Registrar of Research, Innovation and Outreach, and also having been in the lab and head of the lab that does genetic engineering at Kenyatta University for the last 18 or so years, we need to start appreciating, and we need to take our scientists to action, that, hey, what are you doing to solve these problems? And that is very, very important. So there are emerging trends, and we can develop, them very quickly and confer them to this country for application. Yeah.
Now that you've touched on the genetically modified organisms, GMOs, we know that the ban was lifted on GMOs, but the Law Society of Kenya, still insists that it is not safe for us, especially the genetically modified maize. There's a gene, they say that it is not safe. The biosafety, it could raise biosafety issues, with our animals humans and the environment as well. You say that this is actually your area.
Yes.
You know, where they say where there's smoke, there's fire. Why is it that these learned fellows keep insisting that this thing is not safe?
Well, it's not. I was privileged recently in their annual conference in Diani, and I gave a keynote address about climate change and theory to, to practice and all that. And they were surprised the kind of information that we have as a country, that they had never known about this. And of course, the court dismissed that kind of claim in the recent ruling, which is a very good thing for this country. But just to probably realign your thoughts a little bit around the ban, the ban that was mounted against the GMO importation and consumption was in 2012. The president, through a cabinet, dispatch, attempted to, lift that, and there are a number of court cases that went into, our judicial system. I think we have 3 or 4 now still remaining. But what is more interesting is that, of course, the BT, cotton, the biotech cotton is already in the field, and the farmers are already sampling that. So a lot of things, it's a very interesting discussion. When people actually have concerns around the GMO, I usually say that that's a very good position to be in, because for every technology, any technology that is new, there is usually that concern, and that is acceptable. It only becomes unfortunate if the concern you don't know when to stop making it a concern, because we must understand that technologies have a lifetime. There are no technologies that are forever, constant. They keep changing. And if we don't work very quickly towards our ability to adopt technologies when they are useful, we will suffer. And Vivian, let me just highlight a few things. Do you know the rest of the world developed because they were using coal to generate energy? And that is what they used. Even the UK right now, actually next year is when they will decommission the last coal, plantation. But do you know later on, we have enough coal deposits in this country, in Kitui and other parts of this country, and we can't use it. Yet the rest of the world used coal to develop. They industrialize themselves. So right now it is classified as dirty source of energy, and therefore it's not desirable. Then later on there was mechanization. We call it green revolution, all right? Which meant that we needed to put a lot more mechanization, tractors, fertilizers, all these things, farm inputs, so that we can increase the yield. It helped India, Asia, America, lower Brazils and all the South Americans, Mexico. They became food secure. Do you know, we were still wondering what are these tractors. It's right now when we are using a lot more of tractors to even harvest and all this kind of stuff. But do you know, there's again another caveat. Right now it's called carbon credit. We are being asked how much of carbon credit, has this your vegetable produced in the environment before we export it. Yet the rest of the world have already benefited from the green revolution. Then, now we didn't again benefit from that. Then in 1990, the GMO that you see is a very interesting debate in this country. The first GM product was commercialized in 1994. Mathematics will remind you that that is 29 years. We are shying away from just 29 years of eating GMO. In the US. The headquarters of the anti-GMOs, even including Greenpeace, are in the US, which they have left, and that is where it started in 1994. Up to now, they left the US eating those GMOs, but they love us so much, they have come in Africa, and now they, it causes cancer, it causes, diseases. It's so bad for us. Yet for 29 years, it has been eaten. And let me tell you what is sad, and this is because I do GM. I have learned, my PhD was in genetic engineering, making, maize that is drought tolerant. My postdoc was in drug discovery, so I'm a little privileged in terms of knowing what is good for health and what is good for food. What is so sad, Vivian, is like right now, the GMO that we've been talking about here is almost 30 years. I can tell you, now we have moved to something we are calling genome editing. It is no longer, again, this GMO that you are hearing here. So again, we have not benefited. What I think is unfortunate is that Africans, and particularly Kenyans, we need to figure out what is this game that is happening globally. We need to figure it out. And the game is, you can see the thread, that every time a technology is there, we still debate a lot more. We don't benefit, it moves. Again, it was about green revolution. We didn't make use of it on time. Now we are in the carbon credit. Again, we've dropped. Then GMO came in, 30 years, now it's gone. We have been debating up to now. And in the next few years, and EU is already talking about genome editing products. That is where we are headed. This is the thing. There is nothing wrong with GMOs that have gone through the process of approval. It takes 15 years to make those things. And just for simplistic reasons, when you are eating ugali and beef, you don't go in there to remove the DNA. You're eating them with the entire DNA. How come you don't wake up with horns and you ate the DNA from cows? So when did it become, so in your mouth when you are eating ugali, beef and ugali and kachumbari next to it, you have eaten the DNA of tomato, you have eaten the DNA of cows and also of maize in your mouth, and you don't wake up with leaves. There is something about the DNA that people don't know, and unfortunately they have failed to understand, because then if we are eating beef, it's because you want the DNA that is in there, the proteins that it produces. That protein is produced by a DNA. So that DNA, if I move it, imagine, and put it into maize, now maize is GMO. That time we called maize GMO, and now it causes cancer. How did it, what kind of madness is this really?
So what you're saying is just that we are not well educated, we're not well informed about this.
We are actually being played. It's a narrative. And Africans, it is so sad, but it's a narrative that we slow down. Let me give you another example. Do you know also the telephony? The mobile technology, we were also not about to benefit from it had it not just been for our own madness. Remember at the beginning, we were being told it causes, ionizing something, radiation, and we were being sold things like the anti-radiation something, the cover. You remember that story? It is just because Safaricom was here, and started saying, no, this is a good technology, you guys, it is here, it is good for and we looked at the positive. If we never did that, we will still be struggling even in the mobile phone. So every technology must be actually controlled, and that is why the GMO production, we have National Biosafety Authority. Even this is it, and this is probably my parting shot on this. Can you imagine what people said during when the first time the plane was, taking off? There must have been discussions around, who is this person? This technology is competing with even God, flying like angels on the air, and there's nothing holding. This is a very wrong technology. But trust me, without a plane, nobody will ever have touched, even the grounds of the US or any other. The safest way to move is by walking. From here to Mombasa actually is the safest. But how many of us? We use, motorbikes, we use buses, and all of them. We even import vehicles that are 8 years old, and they come here and we brand them new number plates, and it's very safe. Why do we get that confidence? It's because we have NTSA to deal with inspection, because we have, driving schools happening, and that is what we are saying. You cannot stop technology. What we are saying, allow National Biosafety Authority to do its work. It is established by the Biosafety Act 2009. It has the best competencies in there. As scientists are also living in this country, all we are looking for is the best thing for this country. And GMO, I will repeat and again, it is safe.
Okay.
Very safe.
All right, Prof. Now, as we wind up with this conversation, I want you to give us your last remark as a biotechnologist on the rains and our food security. Your last remark on that.
Well, it is unfortunate that we are again losing the water. How I advise that in the future we plan very well, particularly on devolved functions like agriculture. We can speak, the two different governments can speak in one voice in terms of building terms, and more importantly, my sympathies to our brothers and sisters really who are right now undergoing a lot of displacement because of this. But more importantly, let's plan well. Let's always respect science and data. Meteorological department had already indicated that, but as always, we missed it. Let's plan better for the future.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on this discussion and for letting us in and giving us your thoughts on this matter. Now, I'll be taking a short break from here, and Victor will be taking over in a moment. I hope that you have gotten to take a word or two from Professor Richard Odor, who is the chairman, Kenya University Biotechnology Consortium.